Welcome back. This is Buddhist Books Podcast 232, 232, Tipiṭaka Part 152, in which I will continue reading Mahāvagga II. This is Mahāvagga II, Part 8. But first, real quick, I just wanted to mention I had received a little bit of feedback talking about one of the earlier recent episodes. Something to the effect of that I should explain the meaning of the rules and how it applies to our path as Buddhists today. And wondering why I wasn't doing that and talking about how the rules that I had read that day were confusing. So, just to clarify, I'm not a teacher. I am a fellow student. I have not read this before. I am reading this for the first time and inviting you to come along on the journey with me. There are many, many rules of pre-sectarian early Buddhism, so this is how the original Sangha conducted itself. Some of the rules apply and have a direct connection with core principles that we all are familiar with from Buddhism, and others more indirectly, and others are very interesting, and it causes one to ponder. And certainly in the future we will read the Sri Lankan and Burmese Theravadan monks of 1,200 years later, from our perspective about 1,400 years ago. So they came way later than the Tipiṭaka, but a long, long time ago compared to today. And surely they will have an interpretation and an expounding upon much of what we're reading today. But very intentionally, I would like to read the Tipiṭaka itself without that layer of interpretation that came after Mahayana had already developed, long after King Ashoka had brought Buddhism into the mainstream and made it the national religion of India for a while. I would like to simply learn what it says. And sometimes I think it would be the equivalent of saying, when a court is in session, just a regular secular court today, the bailiff knocks when the judge walks in and asking, why can't you explain to me the spiritual significance that applies to me and my journey through life today? What is the spiritual significance of the bailiff knocking at that time? There may be some ancient reason for that does apply to some aspect of one's personal journey through life. But I think that searching, insisting that everything we read in the Vinaya Piṭaka must have an interpretation that is immediately applicable and understandable in 2024 in an abstract, metaphorical way is asking too much. It's asking the wrong questions. Some of the rules may be applicable. Some of them definitely not. And when I read something that's overtly sexist or bigoted, or something that was, very taken for granted back then, taken for granted a few decades ago, let alone back then I point that out and I say, let's not do that. Let's let that be in the past. So, and then other times, again, when it has a spiritual significance that is observable, that's noticeable, then I point that out. And you probably, as I'm reading this, may notice things that I miss. There's a very high likelihood that you are wiser, further along on your path, more Buddhist, more enlightened, and, generally a better person than I am. My environment behind me, I've created over the years from an aspirational perspective. I meditate not because I am a not because my mind is quiet or peaceful, but because it's not. I aspire to be monk-like. I aspire to be Buddha-like. I'm not here presenting myself in this way to in any way imply that I am those things and you're not, or that I'm a teacher and you're a student, or that I have any more authority to interpret these words than you do. What I am here to do is share these words with you just in case you are interested. These words were translated directly from the ancient Pali language into English by the Pali Text Society. And they're available for us to read. You may not have a copy. You may not be in a position to buy a copy. You may not have quite enough interest to budget it in to to get a set. They are, outside of any copyright restrictions, so you can find them on the Internet Archive, for instance, archive.org. But it may be straining on the eyes to, be reading off the screen. It may cost a lot in paper and ink to print it out so that you can read it on a piece of paper. So, as a free service, I am sharing my experience of reading this with you aloud so that you can hear the words. And also, by doing that, by having a disciplined way in which I am going through and reading this, it is motivating me to read it. So it's not entirely selfless, my motivation for having this YouTube channel and for hosting this podcast. It is to get myself to read it. So I hope that helped clarify any confusion. He also called me a bodhisattva. I think that was sarcastic. It's okay. I am not a bodhisattva. Perhaps in another life I will begin upon that path. But no, I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel. And if you're looking for one where people will break down and explain the rules in ways that apply to you from a teacher perspective, then this isn't it. Sorry. There's many YouTube channels. This is just one of them. It's what you get is what you get here. And I'm sorry if it wasn't what you were looking for. Best wishes to you, and go in peace. Okay. And anyone else who wants any further clarification about this podcast, what it is, what I do here, who I am, that kind of thing. Here's an introduction to Buddhist Books podcast. It goes on for a little over 20 minutes explaining all these things. And anyone who, maybe this is the first video you saw, if so, I apologize that it's the one where I ramble on about this stuff for a while. Doing my best to not be in a state of irritation about it, as one does. If you would like to start at the beginning of the Tipiṭaka with the big rules, rule number 1 being the biggest rule of all, and before it even gets to rule number 1, it explains why there's rules. It explains the story of Lord Buddha leading up to the establishing of rules as a concept. And then there's the big rules, then there's the less big rules, then there's even less very small rules, very subtle small rules, and then it finishes with the rules for monks and begins with the rules for nuns, and then there's the rules for nuns for a while. If you would like to start at the beginning of the Tipiṭaka, you can click right there. So this is after the rules for monks, after the rules for nuns. These are the rules for how the order should conduct itself in general, who should knock when the judge walks in, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's lately, the last couple of episodes have been a little bit dry, a little bit kind of, procedural. What do we do when we're reciting and this happens and it's raining and 4 monks arrive and, this kind of thing. Oh, well, you do this. Okay. All right, so that all being said, I bet you're looking forward to it. I know I am. Let's get to today's reading. Quote, monks, you should not go on an observance day from a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are no monks, except with an order, except there be a danger. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from a residence where there are monks to what is not a residence where there are no monks, except with an order, except there be a danger. Was there a difference between those two things? If there was, it was very subtle. Monks, you should not go 3 dots. So Pali Text Society has decided to omit saying it again. So he's saying this 3 times. It's very important. So monks shouldn't leave a residence where there are monks to go to a place where there are no monks unless there's a danger. If there is some deeper meaning behind this, I'm not sure what it is. Just being honest. Okay. Either to a residence or to what is not a residence where there are no monks except with an order, except there be a danger. Monks, you should not go on an observance day. Okay, so these are rules for the observance day, which again is the one day out of the month where they recite all the rules. And it's connected to the phases of the moon, I think. The 15th day of the half month. I'm not sure exactly how that would translate into our calendar today. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from what is not a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are no monks except 3 dots. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from what is not a residence where there are monks to what is not a residence where there are no monks except, okay, so it's every different combination of don't go from a place of any kind, whether it be a residence or not a residence. And so rather than saying that, he's saying don't go from a residence where there are no monks to a residence where there are... Don't go from a place where there are monks to a place where there are no monks on an observance day. Observance day is for getting everyone together and reciting the rules so that everybody remembers the rules, which the stated reason for that is so that the order would last a long time. Because Ananda asked, how do we make sure the order lasts a long time? And Lord Buddha said once a month, the order should recite all the rules, because that's what the Jainists did. Deeper meaning? Not sure. Sometimes history is just history. Sometimes, things are... I think what happened was as the Lotus Sutra and other sutras were written, things became much more abstract and fantastical. And though it was written as, Lord Buddha came out and said this to the assembly, obviously in the imagination of the monk who composed the sutra, for instance. But this is the closest thing we have to actual history, and some of it is just literally what it is. It's saying, we want to make sure all the monks remember the rules, so if you're not there on time, it's a wrongdoing, that kind of thing. So, there it is. If you're interested in that, as I am, then we will continue reading. Otherwise, there's a lot of other channels you can watch or other things to do. You can meditate. Actually, I recommend that. I recommend turning off this video and meditating. That's a better thing to do with this free time that you have. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from what is not a residence where there are monks to what is not a residence where there are no monks, except 3 dots, there be a danger. Monks, you should not go 3 dots from what is not a residence where there are monks, either to a residence or to what is not a residence where there are no monks, except with an order, except there be a danger. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from either a residence or from what is not a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are no monks, except with an order, except there be a danger. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from a residence or from what is not a residence where there are no monks to what is not a residence where there are no monks, except 3 dots, a danger. In the 3 dots are there be. Sometimes Pali Text Society likes to omit random things. Okay. Monks, you should not go 3 dots, either from a residence or from what is not a residence where there are no monks, either to a residence or to what is not a residence where there are no monks, except three dots, a danger. Monks, you should not go on an observance day from a residence where there are no monks, where there are monks, to a residence where there are monks, if the monks there should belong to a different communion, except with an order, except there be a danger. And again, I'm not entirely sure what from a different communion means in this context, if it means they're not Buddhists or what, because again, there were 61 different Shramana ascetic sects wandering around the same region at the same time. Monks, you should not go three dots from a residence where there are monks to what is not a residence where there are monks, if the monks there should belong to a different communion. Three dots, a danger, except there be a danger. Monks, you should not go three dots from a residence where there are monks either to a residence or what is not a residence where there are monks, three dots. It's the same as before in the previous three sections. Three dots. Monks, you should not go three dots, either from a residence or from what is not a residence where there are monks, either to a residence or to what is not a residence where there are monks, if the monks there belong to a different communion, except with an order, except there be a danger. Monks, you may go on an observance day from a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are monks, should the monks belong to the same communion, and if he knows, quote within quotes, I am able to arrive this very day. End quotes. Monks, you may go on an observance day from a residence where there are monks to what is not a residence where there are monks, should the monks there belong to the same communion, and if he knows, quote within quotes, I am able to arrive this very day. And quote within quotes, three dots. To a residence or to what is not a residence where there are monks, three dots. From what is not a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are monks, three dots. To what is not a residence where there are monks, three dots. To a residence or to what is not a residence where there are monks, three dots. Monks, you may go on an observance day from what is not a residence where there are monks to a residence where there are monks, three dots. To what is not a residence where there are monks, three dots. To a residence or to what is not a residence where there are monks, should the monks there belong to the same communion, and if he knows, quote within quotes, I am able to arrive this very day, and quote within quotes, monks. The Patimokkha, that's the rules, should not be recited in a seated assembly, parentheses of monks, end parentheses, before a nun. Whoever should, parentheses, so, end parentheses, recite it, there is an offensive wrongdoing. Monks, the Patimokkha should not be recited in a seated assembly, parentheses, of monks, end parentheses, before a probationer, three dots, a novice, three dots, a woman novice, three dots, one who has disavowed the training, three dots, one who has committed an extreme offense. Whoever should, parentheses, so, end parentheses, recite it, there is an offensive wrongdoing. So, if I were adhering to this rule right now, I would probably be doing a wrongdoing if any of you are not an ordained monk, or if you're a nun instead of a monk. So, yeah, this is perhaps historically interesting, perhaps not. And we can ask ourselves, why? Why can't they recite the rules in front of a nun? And the first two guesses that I have are guess number one, the more understandable of the two, is it would be distracting for some of the monks, perhaps. When you're focusing on the rules, remembering the rules, you should be focused on the words you're saying, not like trying to avoid looking over at the nun that you secretly have a crush on, which you shouldn't do anyway, but sometimes it happens. And so better to just not have the nuns there. And I would say that way of thinking should not be around anymore these days. You know, better to let the men control their selves rather than, exclude the women. So anyway, the other possible interpretation is that they're like not worthy to be there or something like that, and that's obviously worse. So again, how does this apply to you and your personal path and your journey? I don't know that it does. Continuing. The Patimokkha should not be recited in a seated assembly before one suspended for not seeing an offense. Whoever should (so) and (recite) it should be dealt with according to the rule. The Patimokkha should not be recited in a seated assembly before one suspended for not making amends for an offense. Before one suspended for not giving up a wrong view. Whoever should (so) and (recite) it should be dealt with according to the rule. Again, most people say to skip these rules, to just kind of like read the Cliff Notes version. These are the highlights. Here's some of the important parts, or just like list them all rather than reading it all. We're reading it all because we're nerds. And by we, I mean me and you, if you are on this journey with me. A little bit. Yeah, actually, this all, for me, this obsessive journey of wanting to read every word of the oldest scriptures I can find. Originally started with reading, can you see these books here? This is all in order by century, so this is the most recent books I have. These are from the 1200s, which is, of course, 1800 years after, basically 1800 years after these books, though they were written down later. But the rules, according to the rules were established 1800 years before this newer part of the scriptures. So anyway, I was reading these scriptures, and Dogen, Master Dogen, Eihei Dogen, in Zen Buddhism in Japan, was talking to the monks, and he would make reference to things that the monks he didn't need any clarification about. He would say, "Do not be like so and so," and I'm like, "Okay, who's so and so?" And so as I'm reading, I'm getting to know who so and so is. And go, he was the one who did this, and he was a hypocrite because this, and he was staying in his brother's cellmates, this and that, and then this happened, and it was during the rains, and it was when Lord Buddha was, over here in Rajgir, and he was in. It's interesting to me. I would like to be able to catch the references being made by great masters like Eihei Dogen. So, it's tedious to read every word, but that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing it. And probably I should be meditating instead, but I'm doing this. I'll meditate later. Okay. Anyway, so as far as like the rules, there were rules earlier in these first books where it was saying this person violated one of the rules for the reciting of the Patimokkha. They recited the Patimokkha at the wrong time or in the presence of someone who wasn't supposed to be there and things like that. But it wasn't explaining what? I wonder if we'll get to that. And so there is part of me that's actually glad to be reading this because I'm finally getting an explanation, a way too thorough explanation about all the different rules and specifications for the observance day in which the Patimokkha is read. These rules that we're reading are recited aloud by the monks at particular times and in a very specific way, and there's a lot of rules about how you recite the rules. Why? Is that necessary for you or me? Probably not. There are people who very loyally, follow the ancient way of Theravada, which is close to pre-sectarian early Buddhism relative to being a lay follower of Vajrayana or Zen or something. Anyway, but wherever you're coming from, if you're not practicing anything, or if you're a little bit interested in this, or you're a part of this, or you're a monk in whatever Vajrayana, Mahayana, or Zen, or Theravada, I don't know. This may or may not be interesting to you. Okay. So, the Patimokkha should not be recited in an assembly before a eunuch. They didn't like eunuchs. Again, if somebody has an explanation for that other than that they were bigoted, I'm not interested in hearing it, and I wouldn't recommend taking it to heart. They were bigoted. It is what it is. Whoever should, so, and recited, there is an offensive wrongdoing. The Patimokkha should not be recited in a seated assembly before one living in communion as if it were by theft. That's like me, someone who hasn't been formally ordained but is wearing the monk's robes. So I am like a eunuch in that way. 3 dots. Before one who has gone over to a sect, someone who left and is now Ajivika or Jainist or one of the other sort of unnamed sects back then, as they called them. Buddhism was considered a sect among several. 3 dots. Before an animal. Now that seems odd. So if an animal wanders into the assembly of monks and you're in the middle of reciting the Patimokkha, everybody should be silent and wait for the animal to leave? I don't know how to interpret that one. Lucky we're not adhering to this. 3 dots. Before a matricide, someone who killed their mother shouldn't be in the room while you're reciting the rules because they're unclean and impure, like a eunuch or me. I'm being facetious, by the way. I mean, they are. They shouldn't kill your mother unless there's a really good excuse. 3 dots. Before a patricide, 3 dots. Before a slayer of one perfected, 3 dots. Before a seducer of a nun, 3 dots. Before a schismatic, 3 dots. Before a shedder of, a truth finder's, and blood. 3 dots. Before a hermaphrodite. So to be clear, somebody who was born with both genitalia because of their DNA, because nature decided they should be born that way. If they're around, don't recite the rules just because. Again, I'm not sure that there's any meaning to that beyond that they were bigoted and that was just something that was taken for granted back then. Though, in their defense, probably part of that was to help with the survival of the group. In other words, if people in the neighborhood, just random passersby in 6th century BC Bihar, or BCE, if you're into it, were to see the groups reciting and then there's a known hermaphrodite sitting there, they would be like, I saw Lord Buddha's monks and they were reciting their rules in the presence of a hermaphrodite, and it would mar their reputation, and then, they wouldn't grow as efficiently or quickly. And so to help with their reputation, sometimes you make compromises, like if you're with your racist uncle and his family and you don't speak up when they make rude comments about a particular group of people. You don't stop and say, hey, uncle, that's racist. You just keep your mouth shut because last Thanksgiving didn't go so well when you decided to try to come to the defense of those people. So you just keep your mouth shut, right? So maybe it's like that. Maybe, just don't recite the rules in the presence of a hermaphrodite because everybody around the neighborhood thinks that they're icky, right? But you and I today in 2024 know that that's just bigoted, right? Okay. So I'm not sure this has any meaning that can be applied to your personal life, other than that it's interesting historically. Monks. Observance should not be carried out by declaring the entire purity of one on probation, unless the assembly has not risen. And monks, observance should not be carried out on a non-observation day, unless the order be unanimous. If every single person in the order is like, for this specific reason, there's a really extenuating circumstance, it's King Pasenadi of Kosala's birthday, and he insists that we be there, so we're going to move the observance day to the day after. If anybody has a problem with that, please speak up now. Otherwise, let the order be silent, and then everybody's silent. Then it's okay to change the observance day. Otherwise, don't change the observance day, right? The third portion for repeating in the section on observance, that means that's what we just finished reading. In this section are 66 items. This is the key, which means this is like a short, like Cliff Notes. This is what the monks, the short version, if somebody tested, they want to test, okay, do you remember the 66 of this particular, and so you just run through it really quickly to make sure you know it. Have you ever done this when you have like a test and there's like, I remember I used to, there would be like different essay questions, different possible things you'd have to write a page and a half about. And I would, the day before or however long, I would write out 3 essays. And so that whichever one was the one, I would already have written the essay. And sometimes I would go through and shorten the sentence. I would take the first letter of each sentence, or the first letter of each word in the sentence, and reduce it, and then memorize JFRQ, NOGY, and so then whichever essay it was, I'd be like, okay, it's this one, and I'd kind of pull up that file in my head and be like, JRFQ, and I'd be like, just request freaking quarantine, or whatever. I'd have the essay already prepared. So in other words, it's a mnemonic. It's a memory device. So here's the memory device. Other sects and Bimbisara, they assembled together in silence, on Dhamma, in private, on the Patimokkha, daily, henceforth once, according to assembly, for all together, being all together, and Madakuchi, a boundary, extensive, about a river, successive, 2, and small ones. Newly ordained, parentheses, monks, end parentheses, and then Rajagaha. And then in Rajagaha. A boundary, parentheses, as a place where a monk, end parentheses, is not away from, end parentheses, his robes, end parentheses. In agreeing first on the boundary, afterwards on abolishing the boundary, when not agreed upon a village boundary, the throwing of water in river, sea, lake, they combined, and likewise they placed within. How many? Parentheses, formal, end parentheses, acts. Recital, savages, and if there is not. Dhamma, discipline, they threatened. Again, a threat to discipline, reproof, if leave is given. A protest against what is not legally valid. More than 4 or 5. Opinion, intentionally, and if he would exert himself. With laymen, unbidden. In Kodana, parentheses, Vatu, end parentheses. He did not know, several did not know, immediately, and if he should not go, which, how many, and to announce at a distance, he did not remember. Soiled, a seat, a light. Distant parts, another who has heard much. Immediately, observance day and the rains, and a parentheses, formal, end parentheses, act of entire purity. Relations, gaga. 4 and 3, 2 and 1. An offense, collective parentheses, offense, end parentheses. He remembered. The whole order, doubtful, they did not know, one who has heard much, a larger, okay, alike, a smaller, parentheses, number, end parentheses, and when the assembly has not risen. Some have risen, all, and they know, they are doubtful. Those parentheses acting, end parentheses, badly say, quote then quotes, indeed it is allowable, and quote then quotes, knowing, seeing, and they hear. Let them come if parentheses, a monk, end parentheses, is residing. The 4 parentheses sets of, end parentheses, 15 parentheses cases, end parentheses, again. The first day of a fortnight, parentheses, and, end parentheses, the 15th, both communions, parentheses, by, end parentheses, mark. 1 on probation, parentheses, and, end parentheses, a non-observance day, unless the order be unanimous. These partitioned keys are needed for distinguishing the items. And we have finished Mahāvagga II. Next time on what are we up to? It'll be Tipiṭaka 153. Will be Mahāvagga III, Part 1. So it turns out Mahāvagga II, Part 8, was the 8th and final part of Mahāvagga II. So that's exciting. And it's exciting for another reason too, is the beginning tends to be more interesting and more engaging. And then by the end, they're just kind of like, okay, this. Okay, we're done. And then, so the next one, tomorrow or whenever, in a few days, when the next episode comes out, we'll start fresh. And sorry for any, I don't know, general, I don't know. Sometimes I just come on here and say what I have to say. And I try to do that as little as possible and just keep things focused on the reading. But yeah, I don't know. That particular message made me think like, okay, he's expecting something that isn't what I'm doing. And so I wanted to clarify that. And anyway, if you're still here, if you're still with me, thank you. Feel free to click like and subscribe. And if you would like to post a comment below, that'd be nice. And I will go ahead and do the usual closing. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Until next time.